Check this out. This is the world's manliest pencil. It comes in a concrete tube. The pencil is made out of rebar. If this is not the most manly pencil in the world, I don't know what is. Fantastic. Good morning, YouTube. It's Leo. It's been a while since I've posted anything, and I hope everybody's doing well. The reason it's been kind of slow on this channel is that I have been very busy with my consulting business. For those of you that don't know, I consult music technology companies and I help them solve technical and sales and marketing problems. And one thing that I'm now able to talk about is that I was working with Arturia on documentation for two of their recently launched products called Synth V and Analog Lab. These were really fun projects for me because I actually ended up loving the software. People pay me money to play with their software and understand all of the features and then write about how to use them, which is actually a lot of fun for me. So to be paid to do that, I think, is a real blessing, and that was a fun project. And in fact, let me show you something. I liked Analog Lab so much that I ended up getting this glorious thing. I was in the market for a Midi controller, a new one, a better one with a better keybed, and this Keylab 61 ended up being absolutely perfect for what I need. And if you look around the back, it's got a ton of CV, so I can use this with modular gear too, which is extra exciting for me. I had to buy this. They did not hook me up with this or anything like that. I had to pay for it, but I am happy to own that. And let's get back to the desk here so that I can tell you about what we're going to be building today. All right, so check this out. This was actually sent to me by my friends at 4MS. They sent this to me ages ago, and it sort of sat on a shelf for a long time, and I was feeling kind of bad that I hadn't started building it yet. But they asked if I'd be interested in receiving one of their kits for the QP LFO, the Quad Pingable LFO. And I said, yeah, sure, send it over. I will build it and share my experiences with building this thing. Now, I don't want this channel to be something where I go and advertise people's products or, you know, get stuff for free from companies and then do reviews. I don't think you can do an honest review of a product if you haven't bought the thing. If the company sends it to you and you haven't spent any money on it, then it's not really an honest review. So I'm gonna play with this. I'm gonna spend some time getting to know it, but eventually I will actually give this away. I don't really know how to do that. I need to do some research and figure out how, what is the best way of giving something away on YouTube. If you all have ideas about how to do that, if you've seen somebody give something away on YouTube before, then leave comments below. Let me know and I will read those and do my own research and figure out some way of, sending this stuff to somebody else. All right. So as you can see, this has not been opened yet. This is still fresh in the box. I wanted the video to be straight from step one. They also sent me this. You can get the panel of the product in the standard sort of silver with the colors or in a black. And I think black films better, so I asked them to send me this color instead. One thing that's interesting about the panels, if you look, is that these are actually made out of PCB material. This is, if you look on the side, you can kind of see it. This is a FR4 and it's actually the same material that is used in PCBs. This is actually kind of a clever thing. A lot of manufacturers do that. It's relatively low cost and it's a lot less expensive than milling something out of aluminum. And if it's done right, like they've done it here, it actually can look quite nice. And I'm a fan. I think this looks like a nice looking panel. So let's open up the box and see what we see. So, a packet of components, more components, power cable. Here's all the ICs and header pins. I don't want to touch these until I ground myself properly. Some instructions, so printed instructions on what to do, and a list of all of the parts. Oh, look. This is the silver panel, which is aluminum and milled and silkscreen. This actually looks really nice too. Look at that. So I have both, and you can draw your own conclusions, decide which one you like. This is actually quite nice too. One thing I noticed about this is that the panel wasn't looking so nice here, and there's some scratches and stuff, and then I realized there's actually a plastic cover on it. It's kind of hard to see. Oh, this always feels so nice. Look at that. That silk screening on there is perfect, and I still think I'll probably end up using this, as I think these tend to look better on camera, but this, I have to say, is a very nice looking panel. And finally, the actual board itself. This is actually 2 boards, and it looks like they're scored down the middle here. If you look closely, you can see the scoring. So I'm gonna break this at some point. I'll follow the instructions, but I'm sure at some point you're gonna have to snap this to get your 2 separate boards. There are a lot of components on here, but I mean, none of this looks very difficult. So let's open up bag number 1, see what we got. Okay, so we got knobs, potentiometers, jacks, and switches. So there's all the mechanical sort of jacks and things, and I'm assuming this is actually going to be the various resistors and capacitors and other things like that. Yes, so it's always handy to have a small box, like just a leftover box from some packaging. That way you can dump all your components out and know where everything is. Right, so mechanical stuff in one box and electrical stuff in the other. And it's a good idea to actually go through the bill of materials, the BOM, and make sure that everything that is supposed to be in here is actually in here. So I'm going to do that. I'll time lapse it so that you're not sitting there watching me count things. But all this needs to be either here or here or here. And once I've confirmed everything, then I'll get building. You'll notice the colored LEDs come actually taped to the paper itself, which is smart because unless you run current through them, you won't know if it's a red, white, blue, or green. So it's nice that they've done it like this. And when you take these out, you should be careful to make sure that you take the red one out when you need it. Otherwise, you might mix these up and end up with the wrong colors. Interesting. So these are AT-tiny microprocessors. That's interesting that there's 4 of them. You've got your standard TL074 op amps. These are very common, they're used everywhere. There's 1 diode array and 1 larger AT-tiny. And sockets for all these things. It's nice that it's socketed because if you insert one of these wrong or you do something and you fry one of these chips, it's easy enough to take this out and then get a replacement chip and put it into the socket. If these were soldered onto the board itself, then unsoldering something like that when it's on the board, it can be a nightmare if you don't have the right tools. So it's a nice touch that they've included the sockets. Okay, so I've counted everything else. We're down to the resistors only here. And these are loosely packed, which is kind of a pain, but you're gonna have to go through and look at these color bands, which I've always had a hard time telling some of the colors apart, like red and brown. Some of these colors are very similar, so I don't bother with any of that. I take out my multimeter and make sure that it is set to the ohm setting. And once you've got that, all you have to do is just take your part, take your leads, and just measure what is going on inside that part. For people that are new to this, there's these different values of resistors, right? So you've got like a 10K, and what you see on the multimeter might not end up being exactly 10K. Like this reading is 9.81. That's perfectly fine. We're dealing with analog components here, and there is tolerance. So 9.80 is perfectly close enough to 10K, and we put that along with the 10K resistors. All right, so there you have it, folks. Every one of these has been measured. This might seem like a lot of work, and it kind of is. It's a little bit dull. I don't love this part of the process, but I strongly recommend that you take the time and do this. If you take one of these and you accidentally plug it into the wrong hole because you didn't stay well organized, you are going to be in for a world of hurt during the troubleshooting, because the product might not work, or it might work and will behave in weird ways. And those kinds of problems can be tricky to troubleshoot. So anything you can do during the organization to make sure that you're components are nicely labeled, everything is organized, will help you have a smoother build. And I would recommend you take the time to do this. So since everything is accounted for, we're ready to start building. Now, it mentions in the instructions that the board actually comes as one board, which is true. It's actually two different boards with a score line down the middle. And the instructions say that it's easy to assemble as one piece, but then snap the boards apart afterward. I don't think that's great practice. With through-hole, it's probably fine because there's enough solder to hold everything in place, but I would never do that with surface mount, because when you physically flex the board to break from that scored line, you're putting pressure on the board, and any solder joints that you have that are a little bit weak, there's a chance that those are going to break, which you don't want. So it's better, I think, to do that before you start and not have to flex the board once all your parts are populated on there. So let's go ahead and do that now. You just carefully, you can hear it, and then snap it the other way. And one more time, I'll do it. Okay. Simple as that. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that before I start soldering things on here, I think it's good practice to take some isopropyl alcohol like this and clean off the boards. The reason I like to do this is because I have no idea who's been handling these boards. It could be that there's a layer of grease on them, or somebody with sticky fingers touched the boards and stuff, and you don't want any of that. You want this to be a nice clean build, and to minimize the chances of any contamination or problems, what I like to do is just spray the boards and wipe it down to make sure that there's no gunk, there's no oily residue or anything else left on the board from people handling it or manufacturing. And you will improve your chances of a successful build. So now that we've got everything organized and ready to go, let's get started. If you look at the board, you'll notice that every component actually has a label in the silk screening on the board itself. Right? So if you take a look here, you can see that there's two holes, and then in between there's white silk screening saying 10K, which means you need to put one of your 10K resistors in that hole. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I have a video on how to do through-hole soldering, so I'm not going to go into great detail in this video. I will put a link to that video for people that want to see it, but I'll do maybe one or two parts just to show you how it is done. So you take your part inside your grip here and then turn it so that the legs are pointing out like that, and then find your component and slide the part through. Now, with resistors and many other components that are not polarized, you can plug these in anyway. You can plug it in this way, you can plug it in the other way, it makes no difference. Certain parts like diodes and certain types of capacitors are polarized, and you gotta look out for that. But the instructions make all of that clear, so just follow the instructions, you should be good to go. So you'll see that I've got the part in there now, and on the other side I've bent the legs out so that the part does not come out. Now the next step is to take your soldering iron. This is hot, and touch the soldering iron to both the leg and the pad that it is connected to, and just give it a little dab of solder. Get some solder on there, just like that. Make sure it wicks to the leg and the pad, like that, and that's it. Once you're done here, take your clippers, and you won't need these legs anymore. So try to cut this as close as you can to the board without scratching or damaging the board. The rest of the process for resistors and capacitors and diodes and stuff is exactly the same as this. I will time-lapse the whole thing and just blast through all the rest of the parts. As you see me work, you'll notice that I only have one set of components out on my work surface at any given time. So I take out one set of resistors, put them all in, and then move on to the next one. By setting myself up in a way where I can't really make any mistakes, I tend to not make mistakes, and I tend to have successful builds. So the theme of this video, if you haven't picked up on it, is preparation. I spend probably a quarter to maybe half of my time on any DIY build reading instructions, counting parts, making sure that I understand every single instruction perfectly before I start doing anything. I think beginners and especially novices tend to think, yeah, I already know this. I've done, 1 or 2 projects in the past and I'm just gonna rock and roll through this thing. And that they should spend like 99% of their time actually soldering things onto a board. And that's not really how it works. What you need to do is follow the rule of the 7 Ps. I love collecting these old-timey sayings. And the rule of the 7 Ps is as follows. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Say it with me now. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. What this means is if you take your time and plan things out and make sure that you are set up to perform that job as flawlessly as you can, you're going to have a much better result. The worst thing you can do is rush through something and then take 3 times as long as you need to because you have to troubleshoot all these weird issues. And what's even worse than that is you end up with lingering doubts as to whether your workmanship is good. Maybe you get a product working, but now you have doubts as to, does this module or does this synth actually sound like the way it should? Or were there other problems because I rushed through the project? So don't be that person. Take your time and really enjoy the process as much as you can and try to make the product as perfect as you can. And then you'll be able to rely on this thing for years to come. Now this section of the video is all on time-lapse, but I should mention there is a separate video where I go in depth, step by step on how to do through-hole soldering. I will link to that in the show notes and you can go check that out if you're not feeling confident about what to do. Watch that video and hopefully you'll be confident enough to take on your first project. So here we have the module. I have followed all of the instructions, including step number 13, which is take a break. That's good advice. If you're building something complicated, it's nice to sort of walk away, come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes and a fresh brain and take a look. It's easy to miss a solder joint. It's easy to accidentally plug in an IC the wrong way. I have done that and I have paid the price for that. But I've taken a look at everything and I think everything seems to look fine. I don't see any problems with this and I'm feeling comfortable enough to plug this into my test case. This is a spare case that I have that I use to test modules and stuff. If I build the DIY thing, I don't want to be plugging this into my main Eurorack system with all my expensive modules. So this lets me sort of power it up, leave it on for a little while, maybe bring signals into it. And if there's anything wrong, it will be contained to this small case and not the overall system as a whole. Now, the instructions say go ahead and power it up and keep an eye on it. If you see any problems, then immediately pull the plug and take another look. So plug it in and see if any of the lights come on. If so, that's a good sign. So let's see. All right. So those are the on-off switches and they seem to be fine. There is a ping command, so this is tap tempo, so cool. So that seems to be working. Let's tap this one slower and this one fast. And I can turn these on and the lights, red, white, blue, and green. So those are coming on and off. And there is a calibration routine. In fact, let me just do that right now. So this is the minimum. That's the maximum. They recommend setting it to about halfway. That's it. Very simple calibration, which I like. So I think we are good to go. I'm gonna put these knobs on and call this thing done. And there you have it, folks. The QP LFO from 4MS. I know I said I'd put the black front panel on there, but this silver one with all the colors really won me over. This is really quite top notch. I've tested this thing off camera and it works great. I've also made a rough edit of this video and realized that it's already at a whopping 45 minutes, which is too long. So I'm gonna save using this module for another video. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please click that like button. If you enjoyed this video a lot, consider subscribing to my channel and help me get my subscriber count up. And if you like what I do on this channel, consider heading over to Patreon and supporting this channel with even $1 a month. It makes a big difference and I would really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.